What does it mean to not know anything? Like, you know absolutely nothing. You don't even know what sight looks like yet, right? There's nothing in the world that like there is to know that you are aware of. You're unaware of everything. It kind of feel like maybe a black box, right? Or I guess you could say it's synonymous with being dead or being unconscious in that same way. I'm not conflating consciousness with knowledge. Just heads up. But I do think that the two are interlinked, right? In the same way, it's you don't know anything when you're born. When you're born, right, you have to learn everything from very scratch, right? You have to learn how to see. You have to learn how to hear. You have to learn how to imagine yourself as an actual baby right now, as an actual just born newborn child. Everything is just like it's just bright. There's just like fuzziness all around you. You don't even like see any specific like shapes or patterns because you don't know what the hell a shape is, right? You don't know what that thing is you're looking at. It looks fuzzy to you. If I were to say the word Google, that doesn't mean anything to you. That doesn't carry any value or context or anything. It's like when you look at that word Google, right? When you look for meaning in that word, there's a fuzzy atmosphere around it, right? As adults or even as children, right, we've learned to quickly be able to identify stuff. We've learned to quickly be able to see, oh, that's a new thing, but it is a new thing. We're able to quickly clear it up, right? Now, Google, like, has a definition, and the definition is that it has no definition, right? That meaning was defined for you, right? That came into being. When you're a child, when you're a baby, you don't have any such concept of even that, right? When you're an actual little infant, the words around you aren't even gonna sound like people are speaking words. It's just gonna something like that, right? And that applies to all of your senses. Eventually, you do start to be able to learn these things. You learn how to control your body. You learn how to make sounds with your mouth on purpose. You learn how to hold memories, and then you build a sense of self like that, right? These things have to not be taught to us because you don't know how to be taught yet, right? Starting from scratch is literally like one of the most insane thing that every single one of us has done. That's nothing short of a miracle. The fact that we are able to know anything is utterly and absolutely a gift. It was given to us. There is no other way to explain that. Making sense of the senseless and patternizing the chaotic is simply how humans are wired to do anything. The only things that we are able to do are see pattern and make pattern. Everything else in the entire spectrum of human ability is built off of this fundamental process. I don't even know if make pattern is the right word to use in that context, but it serves its purpose here. We see pattern in the unpatterned, and we create pattern from the unpatterned, kind of in one fell swoop almost. And I think one of the easiest ways to show this absolutely, definitively, is when you just talk about language. Language as a concept is this entire process condensed into one subject that is easy for people to understand. Language is a pattern that we acquire, right? It's a learning that we do. We learn to see the repetitions, we learn to see the familiarities, right? We learn to connect this thing, this sound, to that sound. Those sounds are similar. Wait, oh, they're the same sound. Oh, okay, so I can say ba, ba, ba. And I just said the same thing 3 times. Now, okay, let's move on from babies. Let's talk about the adults in the world, right? When you, as an adult, hear a foreign language that you have never heard before in your life, that is straight gobbledygook. That is absolute, complete nonsense. But that's only because you don't have the infrastructure necessary to decode these patterns quick enough to understand them and the meanings behind them. That's the process of science. That's the process of whatever, right? But when you have a language that you don't know, but that you are familiar with, you can still see the patterns. I don't speak any Chinese, but I could probably say 领用邦中道用心乖多就 or something, right? And that sounds to my ears to fit the pattern of Chinese, of Mandarin, right? And if I were to further refine on that mechanism that I have built to imitate Mandarin, if I were to build on that infrastructure that I already have, right, to hear the different sounds, and then if I were to ascribe a certain meaning to certain sounds, I were to understand it a bit more deeply, I can learn to build the language model in my head, a language model, kind of like an AI. Because that's the same process that AI does, right? And that's the process that people are like, yeah, that's why it's not conscious. Because all it does is look at what other people are saying, right? And then it kind of just guesses what the most similar pattern would be to get the best response out of you, right? It just mirrors us. It's not really communicating, except what the hell are we doing then? What the hell are we doing if not that exact same process? The only difference is that we are aware of that process, and we know that we are aware of that process, right? We are mirrors into other people, from other people. Well, let me restart. To other people, I am also a mirror to them. I look at my past experience with this person. I go through what the things that I could say in this situation, and I pick the one that applies best to this person and the sense of self that I have built for them in that process. In the same way that, like, when you converse with an AI, it starts to fine-tune its responses to better understand you and the way that you speak, right? I reflect what that person is showing on to me back to them in order to converse with that person. It also essentially defines our realities, our personal realities, I should say. The subjective experience of the world is completely defined by the language that which you use. Not necessarily speaking like English, Spanish, whatever, right? I'm speaking more on like the projections onto the world that which you pattern, right? The patterns that you show into the world. That also includes your body language. That includes your spending habits. That includes the media that which you consume, right? Because that is making an imprint on the world, right? Watching a video, right? is telling an algorithm, not necessarily just an algorithm, but that's the easiest example, is telling an algorithm what you like to watch. You are communicating with the algorithm symbiotically to be able to, so that the algorithm can do its job in building you a feed that which you like. But I'm getting sidetracked. All of these are examples of language. Most things that humans do to interact with the world can be considered a form of language, right? And those languages, because they come from a perspective, a limited framework, right? A framework that you built, right? From, maybe you're basing it off of what other people have told you, maybe you're basing it off of what, but this framework is not going to fit one-to-one to actual reality. Actual reality is intangible to us. If we were to know everything that there could possibly be about a certain thing and like understand it fully and entirely comprehensively and not take shortcuts, not like make assumptions, not do this or that, we would have to literally be God. You know what I mean? To understand an apple to its very core is to understand its history, to understand the atoms within it, to understand the experiences that apple has had, where all the bruises come from, to all these different like little models, every single minute detail to understand that apple fully. You'd have to be God. Therefore, we use biases and assumptions and simplifications and these miniature models, these maps of the world to understand it and to interact with it, right? And that includes your vision, right? Because there's a whole spectrum of light that you could possibly be seeing, but you're only seeing the visible color spectrum, right? These biases do end up shaping our world, whether or not they correspond to the world in a better, more like accurate, I guess, air quotes accurate way, right? If they fit that model less accurately, that's when we call that a bias. But when it fits the model correctly, we call that truth. Interesting how that happens. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because a fascist has a certain model of the world which doesn't really correspond very well to the collective experience, the collective subjective experience that we all share, that we all point to and say, hey, yeah, this is what this is, right? We still collectively don't like understand reality objectively, but we have a better model because we are larger. I think I'm starting to not make too much sense, but I do think I'm getting my point across ever so slightly. I'm moving. Bear with me. A fascist has a different model of the world, and because that model is slightly off, that person is harmful for the rest of us, right? While necessarily that doesn't mean they're wrong, like in a society filled with blind people, the one-sighted person would be considered crazy. It's like, what do you mean you can see? You're schizophrenic, you're stupid, right? But oftentimes it does mean that. Come and tell me that every single black person in the world is a criminal and a thug, and I'll smack you right across the face, you know what I mean? The point is, there is a difference, but that difference is just in how this system is used, not because these people are stupid or wrong. The difference is just in the way that we use these models, right? And we all have models. That's just what the ego is. That's what your sense of self is. It's a reflection of your ideas and your values, right, that you project onto the world, right? And then that becomes your reality, right? That's why it feels that someone on the other side of the political aisle, I guess I shouldn't say other side because I'm a leftist, and then people will think I'm a liberal, right? But people on a different like political side than you seem to be living in a completely different reality because they literally are, right? It's because we all live in our own little boxes that we paint little strokes in, right? These black boxes, like I was talking about, the babies, they can't see anything, right? They don't understand what anything is, right? But then they kind of chip a little bit, right? They kind of make imprints, right, in the patterns that they see, right? And they use that to carve out a sense of the world. And these models get pretty big. These models can get pretty good, but they can never be one-to-one. Again, they can never be exact, right? And so then we have this assumption that what we experience as reality is the actual, true, real thing behind the veil. And no, absolutely it's not. What do you think? Who do you think you are? Do you think you are actually God? More on that later. Just so I don't leave y'all hanging, the long and short of it is that the ego likes to think it's God, but it's not. But the anima literally is God, which are both a part of you. They're both aspects of you. It's like a little kid playing with a toy, and the toy starts to think that it is the little kid, right? While the little kid is playing with all the other toys, and having different personas when it becomes another toy or whatever. But tangent aside, if we were to have boxes, right? If we were to live in like cells like that, the only way that you would be able to communicate is probably like tapping on a wall, right? Making a pattern, making an imprint onto the world that other people see, and then you build it on from there. That's basically the long and short of it. We're all living in our own little black boxes that are pushed up against each other, and then we use that to define a larger cohesive sense of self, which is kind of what your neurons do as well. Your neurons are little cells, right? Self-aware or not, right? Are acting in a manner that is individualistic. They receive a signal, and then they push that signal out, and that's it. That's their whole life. They receive, send signal, receive, send signal, receive signal, send signal, right? And they understand that, right? Those signals are, guess what? They're patterned. It's communicating with other neurons in the brain, and then they build off of each other's limited sense of reality, right? And make more complex systems of literal communication. I don't know what else you want to call it, right? They're literally communicating with each other to build a larger, more complex system and highway. That way, all of those individual little senses of send, receive, send, receive, send, receive, 1 and 0 bits, kind of like a little transistor, kind of like a little computer, build something that becomes more than the sum of their parts, which is such an interesting concept. It would be really interesting if you could apply that to maybe larger agents that think they are an individual rather than a cog in a much larger, much more sophisticated, huge sense of self with a subjectivity to it in and of itself, right? Which encompasses a lot more than each individual neuron could understand in the first place. Are you kind of catching the metaphor a little bit? Are you catching it? Are you picking up the pattern that I'm putting down? Humanity is an organism. The earth in and of itself is an organism in that same kind of vein, right? It just includes more cells, larger systems of communication, right? Down to the very fundamentals of it, right? When you have these little quarks, right? These little, I guess, energy packets. I don't know what else. What really is a quark, right? I'm 17, by the way. Where you have the smallest form of a thing, right? And then it connects to another thing and uses the information that it receives from that thing to be able to symbiotically work together in a sense to create a larger thing, to create a proton, a neutron, an electron. They don't build electrons, to my understanding. I could be wrong though. Again, I'm 17. And then those things do use that same physical process to come together to form a single atom. And those atoms use that same process to come together to form a molecule to, a DNA. DNA, which in and of itself is literally just pattern. That's all it is. It's just instructions. It's communication in molecule form, which is so freaking sick. That's awesome to think about. And then you go up and you go up and you go up, but then for some odd reason, we stop at human, right? Our brain cells would probably stop at us if they were able to conceive that sort of concept, right? If you take that to its logical conclusion, you would go from the Earth to the solar system to the whatever to the cluster of galaxies to the entire universe to every single universe that could exist, right? Assuming that there is an infinite amount of universes, right? There's reason to assume. But if you were to assume that, right, just take me at my lead, right? It would create an omniverse of everything that would have a sense of self that encompasses everything, that is able to know everything. The omniverse would be God. And all is using the very same process and patterns as language itself, which really puts into perspective how versatile of a concept that is. What does it even mean to be a language? What does that even? It's just a system of communication, right? ASL. Yeah, you understand. You've made it this far. I think you probably understand. Other than that, I probably just sound utterly insane. Yeah, and then those systems of communication end up being the threads that hold us together, right? That hold all beings together. It's literally what holds your cells together, the communication between them. It's literally what holds society together. The fact that we are able to talk about and decide rules and the way that we organize ourselves, similar to how a brain can reorganize itself depending on its circumstance. Everything is made up of parts on parts on parts on parts and parts and parts. And each of those parts is made by communications between these systems of communication. It's communication between entire systems, which is, I don't know, it's so utterly awe-filling. I can't say awful because that has the opposite connotation of what the word should mean. But it just fills me with utter awe, right? Just that concept that like everything is language. Symbiotic relationships in and of themselves are just communications between two animals, right? What if you're still skeptical? I don't know how else to put it to you. Why does a language have to be anything more than just a system of communication? And if it is just that, then everything I've just said stands true, right? I'm also open to being corrected, right? Again, I'm not the wisest nigga in the bunch, right? I'm just a kid. I'm just a guy, right? And these are just the thoughts that I have based on the things that I've seen and the people that I've heard speak and the information that has been downloaded. Everything is language. If all of that wasn't enough for you and you've already been like super like spiritually indulged or whatever, and you understand these concepts very, very like clearly, I think one insight that could probably help you in that front. Everyone else has probably like had their full share. One insight that I like just want to share that like even took me aback was the um when when you're asked the question whether the language that you speak dictates your understanding of the world or the other way around, right? Or vice versa. Um, the answer is both because both are language. It's like you can't split those concepts. Those concepts are inextricably bound.